Unicorn Roast.
Welcome to the Unicorn Roast podcast with Mike Elgin and Emily Forlini. I am not Emily, I am Mike, and I'm so glad that you're here. I'm recording this from sunny Oaxaca, Mexico. And Emily, how are you doing?
I'm good. Your setup looks so refreshing and breezy and just that vacation mode.
Yeah, it's 91 degrees here, and it's still pleasant. I'm on the rooftop of a sort of hotel and restaurant that's owned by a friend of ours. And yeah, it's a great place to podcast from.
Looks so nice.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to talk about today. Another crazy week in tech news. One thing that I wrote about was OpenAI's rumors of their $20,000 quote PhD level AI subscription, which is pretty crazy. And I guess the idea is that the more expensive the AI, the more of a human it can replace. So here they're saying, it'll be $20,000 and it could replace, maybe someone who is hired to do like $30,000 or $40,000 worth of work. That's their salary. So they're basically hawking budget computer employees now is their next move. Yeah. What did you think when you saw that?
Well, it's ridiculous. First of all, I mean, eventually they're going to have a menu of LLMs, or here's somebody with an engineering degree. Here's somebody who majored in communication studies. It's like you just pick the education level of the person you want to replace with AI and do it at a fraction of the cost. I love the fact that Google does something like this as well, in a way, sort of. Their Notebook LM product, which is I think an experimental thing still, has a feature that'll take whatever PDFs and documents you dump into a certain box, press a button, and it will produce a podcast. And this is free. So they're replacing podcasters with the amount of money that podcasters make, which is nothing. So kind of the same thing.
Like us.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. I mean, I think a little bit it's kind of a pipe dream. Like, I think it's a business dream. Okay, we can have people doing the same jobs for a lot less. Businesses are always wanting to cut headcount. Like, how many layoffs are we seeing all the time? But I mean, an interesting wrinkle is they're saying this will be a quote PhD level. And then a bunch of people commented on this news and they were like, well, PhDs are only getting paid $20,000 anyway. So it's like, it's actually a 1-to-1 match. Which is sad, and that could be a whole other tangent, but it's a 1-to-1 match, and it's like, well, why not just hire a human who's actually super intelligent and can also comment and direct the work appropriately, work in labs, like do everything a PhD does. Like, why
make
would
coffee?
Make coffee with all their brain power.
Yeah.
I could see it working in some ways. Like, let's say somebody is hired and like part of their job is just to move files from one folder to another folder on a computer. Like, let's just say whatever's going on organizationally, that's like a portion of their job. They spend 2 hours a day doing it. Like, what these AIs are proposing is that they can take actions on the computer. So it's not just like a chat bot, like you ask a question, it gives an answer. Well, the new thing in AI is like they can perform actions, like simple things on the computer.
It's agentic AI, which you're going to hear that buzzword like endlessly from now until the end of time.
I know. And this is like the peak agentic vision of the whole tech industry. Like, we can have them do things, like not just answer questions, like they can actually get closer and closer to replacing a human. So I could see that being desirable. If my job was to move files from one folder to another, I would be like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But $20,000, I mean, OpenAI is also offering lower tiers. So they're saying they're going to have for $2,000, they're going to have a lower tier. That's a quote high income knowledge
you get a graduate
worker.
Student.
Yeah, a $10,000 tier is, and this is per month, by the way, software developer. So they're having like these tiers of jobs, and maybe a lower tier could work. I don't see a company paying $20,000 a month for one of these.
They are doing something that I've seen lots of businesses do, and to a certain extent I myself have done, which is that some people, some companies are just willing to pay. Just money is literally no object. They don't care how much they pay. And so, for example, for my newsletter, I have a tier. I thought, what the hell, Substack offers this. I have a tier that's like, my newsletter is $5 a month, and it's $50 a year if you get the year package. But if you want to give me $200, or I don't even remember the amount. Nobody's ever done it. But I figure, it's like if people are super excited about what I'm doing, my mother, unfortunately, is no longer with us, so I don't imagine who might do that. But
I'll
throw
do
it out
Mike.
there and just see.
I'll
thank you.
Clear out my savings account and throw you a big bone.
Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot.
Yes.
But really, the really dumb thing about all this is that OpenAI is so confused. We talked about this on the last podcast. They're so confused about the relationship between the quality of what they're offering and the price and the tier and the version number and all that stuff. We're talking about, was it 3.5 or 4.5? What was the version number?
4.5. That came out. Yeah.
And they came out and they're like, well, this is almost as good as an older version that we had, and it's a million times more expensive, and it's not really that great, but it's really, really good. And some people say, and instead of saying, here are the metrics, here's the data, here are the benchmark performance numbers.
Yeah, here's like, why you should buy
magical. Some people say, somebody on Twitter told me it was magical, and this is the CEO of OpenAI saying this, Sam Altman. So
in
it's
all
like
lowercase letters in his tweet.
Exactly. So is the $20,000 a month version that much better than the version that's $20 a month? They said that the $20 a month version was amazing. So it's really clearly a bunch of BS. It's clearly a bunch of BS. They're fishing for money. This whole set of announcements that they've made over the last couple weeks indicates that, to me, that OpenAI is a company in trouble, and they are really wanting to raise money. They're getting pressure to make some money. Yeah,
they burned through an estimated $5 billion last year. The New York Times reported towards the end of 2024. So, and they're raising tons of money. So they have another $40 billion round in the works right now. Mm-hmm. So at some point, I feel like they're hitting the phase where the investors are starting to say, how are you going to monetize and how are you going to actually make money? And I mean, a lot of people do have ChatGPT Plus, which is $20 a month, but that's truly small potatoes compared to all the money that they're bringing in. So they also, Sam Altman tweeted he's like kind of tinkering with the plans. He was like, here's an idea. He puts this out on Twitter. What if we just gave you credits? So instead of having a subscription to one model, you would have credits and you could use it for features offered across other models. And it's like, is he trying to be just transparent that they don't know what they're doing, or he's trying to foster some kind of community? I don't know. I thought it was a little weird that he tweeted that out. And basically everyone who commented was like, that's a bad idea. Is this going to create a scarcity mindset where people are going to feel like they're on a budget constantly and using features here and there, and it's just not going to work. So
it's like buying minutes for your phone, like a burner phone, and you buy 20 minutes, and then now it's not so fun to use a phone if you always have to be worrying about the time you're spending on it.
Yeah, and I think it's funny, Sam Altman definitely thought that was a good idea, which is why he tweeted it. And everyone was just like, that's not a good idea, dude.
He probably wants the President Trump to launch a federal credits reserve, for AI credit, something like that, which is
he's going to tax other AI companies and not OpenAI.
Yeah, you have to give him credit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's all so very lame. Well, speaking of the world of LLMs, and ChatGPT specifically is part of this story that I wrote about. And this story is literally, I think, the most appreciated, underreported, under-discussed story of the year so far that I've seen. Essentially, what's happening is that we've known for a long time that the Russian government has been propagandizing the world, trying to change election outcomes, trying to sow division in democratic societies. They gave up on saying the Russian system is better than the democracies, and now their whole thing is, no, it's not better than the democracies. The democracies are worse than we are, and then they try to make it worse through sowing dissent. The Russian government has created, has organized street protests in the United States of opposing sides, so that the two sides would physically go at each other and create lots of media that makes the U.S. look like it's on fire. All this kind of stuff. We all know about this stuff. It's been going on for years. But the most recent reporting is that this organization called Pravda, which is based in Moscow, works for the Russian government, has been flooding the zone with articles with the intent of getting them into LLMs so that when you ask ChatGPT or any number of other chatbots questions about Russia, about the Ukraine war, about other things that the Russian government cares about, you'll get Russian disinformation. And the news sort of watchdog site NewsGuard found that they got asking relevant Russian questions, Russian disinformation 33% of the time.
Oof.
When asking it questions. And how did Moscow do this? How did Putin do this? The way they did it was they created 150 websites in 2024, just in the calendar year 2024. And on those websites, they published 10,000 articles a day for a total of 3.6 million articles in 2024. The chatbots.
With AI? Like an AI
No,
just wrote
they
the
just
articles,
put them.
or they have like a human content farm?
Oh no, I'm sure they used AI. They're just
I'm
churning
sure,
it
right?
out.
They
Yeah.
probably just uploaded all the latest ordinances or BS propaganda.
What they were doing was that they were putting they have a whole set of pro-Russia sort of websites and news sites out there that are independent, and then they have Russian state media. They took all of this content and they said, give us, rewrite these articles a million times in different ways, and then they publish them, and then they're using really high quality SEO. That's probably also done with AI, because this is a massive scale. They don't have the money or the people to do this kind of scale without AI. So, and AI is cheap and free,
Right.
or $20,000.
I mean, the thing that's scary is like anyone could do this, like literally anybody.
Exactly.
I mean, out of
Exactly.
your basement, you could do this. Like if you just create a website, or I mean, people are automating this stuff, and the scale that your
Right.
AI can put an individual on is nuts. And I remember when all this stuff first came out, somebody who had a Wikipedia page changed their Wikipedia page to like a really ridiculous claim about them, like some insane award that they had won. And then they Googled themselves, and the Google summary of them just immediately pulled that, ridiculous fact and just put it in the AI summary. And they were like,
Right.
you can manipulate this thing so easily.
Right. And so anyway, this is the thing that's happening. And if you think that the chatbots that are churning out, 1/3 of their Russia-related answers are churning out Russian disinformation or obscure, the 10 that they tested, from which they got this 33% results, were, drum roll please, ChatGPT 4.0, U.com, Grok, Pi, LeChat, Microsoft Copilot, Meta AI, Claude, Gemini, and Perplexity. That's the who's who of AI chatbots, and
That's the who's who in the Western world. I mean, there's the LeChat, which is in France, and then that's from Mistral. That's the big one in Europe, and then all of our big ones.
Exactly. And so just to be fair about all this, the chatbot makers have said all the right things for the most part. They promised to work with NewsGuard to weed this stuff out and to tweak how they harvest information to avoid this kind of Russian disinformation. But like you said, and that's exactly the main point, it's not about Russian disinformation. It's about disinformation in general going to the highest bidder. Elon Musk could spend $1 trillion and just determine what global public opinion is about ketamine, for example, or whatever.
Right, because the more money you have, the more AI you can power, the more you can crank out this stuff, and then here we are.
And the most tragic thing for people like you and me, Emily, is that our authentic voices where we're writing news articles that are very factual, and we're writing opinion articles that have been very thoughtfully produced, are just getting buried. If there's an arms race to see who can flood the zone with the most number of articles, and that's what the truth becomes, whoever can put the most articles out there, then my little piss ass 1 or 2 or 3 articles a week it's just as if, on the other hand,
it's
they
true.
will be stealing
It's
my
true.
content.
Yeah, they could be stealing your content, but the way that the AI summaries work is they look for consensus in the internet. So
Right.
consensus, they basically define as like what everyone thinks about a subject. And so if you have, a Russian website mocking as a research organization putting out quote unquote studies, and ChatGPT thinks that all of these Russian created websites are legit, it'll say, oh, there's consensus on that topic, and here is the answer. And it would just be Russian propaganda in this case,
Right.
because that's what the tech thinks is real. And so that's where they might consider us, but if if we're in the super minority, we're not going to meet that consensus threshold, and our work's not going to be shared as part of the answer.
Exactly. So we got a problem. I think people should be more aware of it. And the way I framed this in my Machine Society newsletter this week is that where's a Red Scare when you need one? So back when the Bolshevik Revolution happened, there was a panicky Red Scare in the U.S. where everybody was anti-communist. Not everybody. And there was persecution and deportations. And then in the 50s, when the Soviets really started more aggressively expanding, there was another Red Scare, McCarthyism, the blacklist system in Hollywood, all of that stuff, which we're very familiar with, where there were persecutions, essentially cancel culture, but fueled by Senate demagogues like Joseph McCarthy. And a big part of what they were afraid of is Russian talking points being inserted into the American conversation through media and Hollywood and so on. And what I think is hilarious in a very unhilarious way is that the degree to which Russian talking points are being literally inserted into literally the conversation places of American society, the social networks and the chatbots. And people are like, what are you going to do? And so it's like, where's the hysteria? Where's the panic?
Yeah.
It's like, where's the panic when you need it?
I completely agree. There's many issues with AI, and it just feels like the funding going towards it just has no acknowledgement that it's on shaky ground. It just baffles me. And like, I had a rough week with chatbot answers. I continue to not be able to fully trust them. I'm just getting, so, okay, this week I Googled, no, it was on ChatGPT. It was on ChatGPT. And I said, give me a quote from Ronald Reagan about tariffs, because I know he's not pro-tariff, and I thought that would be a very interesting data point. And just because, like, Trump has the Make America Great Again slogan, like, comes from Ronald Reagan, and he's kind of trying to be, like, born of that tradition. And I was like, okay, give me a quote from Ronald Reagan on tariffs. And then it gave me one, and it was, tariffs raise prices, they're bad for the American consumer, the whole thing. And then I was like, okay, and it was in quotes. And then I said, okay, when's that from? Like, what year, what speech, what's it from? And it goes, oh, that's not a real quote. That's just something he might have said. I was like, what? Like, you're just quoting American presidents? And I had to ask a follow-up to make sure it was I didn't even know it could possibly not be a real quote. And I just continue to just not be able to trust like the Google summaries or ChatGPT. It's directional, but I cannot incorporate it into my work in good faith. Like,
you can't rely on it, and it's because it doesn't think, it doesn't have a mind, it doesn't have a consciousness, it's not a human, it doesn't have human experiences, It's not one of us. It doesn't know the difference between something Ronald Reagan literally said and something Ronald Reagan might have said. Those are the same things.
Which is crazy because there's the sanctity of a quote is like, it's a quote direct from that person. Like, it's supposed to be hallowed ground. You don't misspeak for somebody. And then the ChatGPT is just like, yeah, here's a sentence between two, apostrophes.
Yes, but a direct quote from a famous person, again, a chatbot has no idea the difference between a famous person and these distinctions are human. We just base our thinking upon them without even thinking about the fact that we do that.
Yeah, so I basically had.
That, yeah, I'm sorry to step on your words, but the what a ChatGPT type chatbot does, it takes 50 different sets of words and combines them into a single sentence, and so it's doing the same thing with a quote, not really having any appreciation of the fact that a quote is when we say a quote, we mean like literally what they actually said. That's what we mean by a quote. It's not do your thing where you mash up all the quotes into a single thing.
Right. This is not a creative writing assignment. This is like read a transcript and give me the compelling section of the transcript and tell me when it happened. But then, so I was like,
paraphrase Bush Senior, read his lips. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and so I ended up having to go to YouTube and I looked up clips of him discussing tariffs, and I watched, like there's an 8-minute clip, and then I kind of realized that, and I found the quote I wanted, but I realized he said those things anti-tariffs actually in the same speech in which he was like, he imposed a tariff on Japan for semiconductors. Yes. And so I was like, oh, wow, what can you learn by actually looking at primary source material and not getting everything from a chatbot?
So one of the ones that was circulating, in fact, I posted it on social media, was a filmed radio address. And by film, I do mean film. This is the 80s, where he used to do a weekly radio thing, a fireside chat type of thing. I don't know if presidents still do that. I don't know if
they
even
tweet
have a fireplace
they
in
post.
Mar-a-Lago.
They post on Truth Social.
Yeah, that's what they do. And so he was reading prepared statements, but what was interesting about it was there was a big blurb about Canada and how great of a friend they were to the United States.
Yes.
And how we have such a wonderful relationship, and we have a wonderful trading relationship. And then he went on to talk about how, tariffs are the stuff of I'm paraphrasing here, pinko, kami, whatever. But it was like it was a perfect throwback to the current moment where, our president is putting 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada, whereas here was Ronald Reagan, whom Republicans used to revere, talking about how close we are with Canada, how important Canada is to us, and how we should never put tariffs on them and should have an open, free relationship,
free
and
trade,
so on. Exactly, free trade. And he talked about the importance of allies generally and how much America's allies benefit the United States. I mean, everything he said in that was sort of like the mirror. It's almost as if President Trump saw that speech and said, I'm going to do the opposite. It's going to be opposite day in America. And we're going to we hate our allies. We're going to stick it to Canada and, et cetera. So it was really interesting. And so I'm sure there were several speeches where Reagan talked about tariffs. He was a free trader. I mean, it's shocking to hear that Republicans were once in favor of free trade, but they actually were.
Yeah. And it's to that point, if there are many, many speeches, it should have been easy for ChatGPT to comb through this historical information in the public domain from 40 years ago and find it. I mean, it's all over the web, and there's the dorky web pages where it's literally just quotes of him. Like, it's not a confusing UI. It's been out there forever. I'm surprised that it couldn't just pull that. And so Google this week actually tested an AI-only version of its search results. So that basically makes Google into a giant chatbot, and you don't ever see the primary source as a priority on the page. And basically it's in labs now, which means it's just open to a few people. And what they're seeing is a tab at the top, where it's like Google search, maps, images, like that menu bar. There's one that's just like chatbot mode, and the whole screen turns into just you're Googling as a chatbot. Yeah. And they're saying like, oh, we're not going to launch it yet. But I see, if the current trend continues, I see no reason they wouldn't launch that in a year. And then you would just always be getting Russian propaganda. You would think Reagan was saying this and that, and you really don't have a lot of incentive to fact check with the chatbots.
Google sees its search business at risk because people are increasingly, the leading users, the early adopters, the people who really lead the charge into new ways of using computers in general, are increasingly using multiple AI chatbots as a replacement for Google search. In other words, in areas where they used to do Google search, they're now using AI chatbots. Globally, the public is not there yet. We're talking about less than 1% of people are doing this, but they see the writing on the wall. They see people moving toward chatbots. And so they're obviously, it makes sense for them to say, you want a chatbot? Here's a chatbot. We got a chatbot for you if you want a chatbot. So it's like, that makes perfect sense. And of course, I'm one of those as well. There are queries and there are queries. And so if I'm working on an article, I'll double check it. I might use a chatbot just to get a sense of things. I often use AI chatbots to get the complete list if I can think of a partial list. So if I say, if I'm thinking, Google and Amazon are two companies that are over X number of dollars business, and then I'll ask the chatbot, what are the other ones? And they'll say, give me a couple of Chinese ones. And then I take that information and I verify it with Google search and other methods. And so I integrate it seamlessly, and I use several chatbots, and a lot of us are doing that. But there's sometimes where it's like, how old was Gene Hackman? And it's like, even if they tell me he's 12 years old, it doesn't matter that much. They're probably going to get that right anyway. So I'll increasingly use on my phone Perplexity's voice mode, which we talked about a couple of episodes ago. We just talk to it and it gives you a straightforward answer. It doesn't have personality. It doesn't ask questions. It gives you the answer and then it shuts up.
Right.
Beautiful. And again, I don't trust it I use it for things where it doesn't matter that much if the answer is right or wrong, and I assume that it's mostly right. I
Right.
was grilling it just for the heck of it today. We're going to be talking about buying a house later on in this podcast, but I was asking it about the house that we're in the process of buying, and it gave me the price that was listed. And then I asked it again, and it gave me the wrong price.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. You
told
think
me.
little data points they're always going to get right, and it doesn't. And that's where I'm like with this Google thing. It just felt like the kiss of death for public information. Like if all
Yeah.
of Google is a chatbot and the hallucinations are a feature and not a bug of that information source, it
You
just
know,
that
Perplexity is great. Perplexity is, and by great, I mean it's slightly better than average.
yeah.
They have a thing called Spaces in there, which has an interesting feature. And so the idea of Spaces, which is a bad idea and doesn't really work, but the idea of Spaces is you can use Perplexity to write and publish articles. We'll write the articles, and then you sort of like tweak it around the edges. And I think they use it also for training, because if people are tweaking it, that means they're choosing what is right and wrong about the article. So you used to use this for my newsletter. I used to have a thing in my newsletter called Emergent Technologies. And it was just a list of like crazy stuff that I just had to get off my chest that was happening that nobody was paying attention to in the sciences relating to technology and that sort of thing. And I would create a Google Space article. And so what you do is you just grab like some facts, like, Carnegie Mellon invented a ostrich robot or something like that. And you just put that in, and it does its own searches, and it writes a whole article.
Right.
But here's the part that was interesting about it. It would do it in segments, and it'd say, okay, here's a couple of paragraphs, and here are the sources we use for that paragraph.
Well, okay, I'm most skeptical of your complete loyalty to Perplexity.
Okay, I want to hear that, but before you do, let me finish the point about Perplexity Spaces.
Okay.
So Perplexity Spaces will make an article made out of sections, and for each section, it will say, in this section, we use these 5 sources. And then it does another section with some more sources, different sources, some the same, some different. And it tries to do contextual things. So if you ask it about ostrich robots, it'll talk about ostrich robots and Carnegie Mellon specifically in the first graph. Then it will talk about robots in general and that sort of thing. And it really goes off into the weeds sometimes with the sources, but you can go in and it will list all the sources, and they all have a checkbox. And you can say, click, 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 get rid of those. And then it rewrites the section with good sources. So you get to pick the sources individually. I would love to see this in a generic chatbot search where it's like, list the sources from which you got all of these facts, and let me get rid of some and ask you to try harder to find better sources. I'd love to go back and forth with the sources, but instead these chatbots generally kind of try to obscure the sources a bit, especially,
They do.
the GAN one.
ChatGPT is the number one offender at that.
Yes. Yeah. So tell me why I'm misguided and lost in the weeds with my preference for Perplexity. No, I agree that it's wrong and bad, and I should.
No, I think I really like that you use it, because you bring, like what you just said was really interesting, and I totally agree that the chatbots should be way more interested in the sources and should be putting that forward. I struggle to trust them, because I've also tested chatbots where it says, hey, I use this, and this source. And I'm like, oh, good for you. And I'm like clapping and patting it on the back. Oh, you used a source and you cited it. And then I click the source.
Bless your
and
heart.
It's like, yeah, bless your heart, you sweet little chatbot. And then I click the source and it's like complete bogus. And so it's there's so much smoke and mirrors. Like sometimes it's the right source and sometimes it's not. And you just never know. And even in that case, like they give you the confidence, oh, we use these sources, but like you really still have to check that they actually did, because sometimes you click that source and it's a blank web page. It's like, what are we doing?
Trust the chatbots ever.
Yeah.
Don't trust them. They can't think. They're not what they appear to be. One thing that is interesting about Perplexity, and again, I don't want to be just like pro Perplexity. It's probably not the best resource.
This episode is sponsored by Perplexity.
Sponsored by Perplexity, the chatbot that does all these amazing things. No, the thing that I like about it is did you know that in their, so it's a, what do they call it? They call it it's the kind of chatbot that goes out and does a search, and then it gives you the results from that search, as opposed to drawing directly from its training data. And the search engine that it uses is actually the open source version of PageRank, which is what Google is based on. So they've taken the open source version of PageRank and they tweaked it, and part of their product, quote unquote product, is that they've made they've given stronger weights to what they consider higher credibility sources.
Right.
And this, to me, is the way to go. I'm not sure that they do it exactly right. And also, it's a harder problem than it sounds to really, diminish the value of certain sources and promote the value of other sources in terms of weighting, weight as in weight, for the results. But this is what the chat bots should be focused on. And I think their product is not, look at how fast we are, look at how genius we are, look at how we can sound like a natural person. Their product should be, look at how good we are at curating the sources to give you the breadth that you need to find even obscure information. But we're really downranking the crap sources. We're really downranking the Russian disinformation and the sort of compromised influencers and the conspiracy theorists and the lunatics and the racists and all that stuff. We're really not listening to those guys, and we're really promoting the Atlantic Monthly and the New Yorker Magazine and like all these other sources, PC Magazine, for crying out loud. And so that's what I would like to see somebody do. And I like Perplexity because they do that a little bit.
Yeah, that would be good. There's just such a can of worms. Like, okay, first of all, as I said, the technology, that would be great if it could do that, but it's currently not designed to always give you the fact. Like, hallucinations are part of how it works, and there's just
Right.
like no easy fix to that. So that's just a huge ongoing problem. I know it's like broken record on that issue, but it's like that needs to keep getting attention until it's fixed.
Let's do a little experiment before we move on. Let's ask Perplexity a question and see, because I couldn't recall the acronym. I can never recall the acronym of this kind of chatbot. So let's ask it. So I'm launching the.
Okay.
What is the name of a chatbot that uses a search, like a Google-like search, and then gives you results from that search?
One example of a chatbot that uses search to provide results is Perplexity AI. It performs
Okay,
searches.
all right. That's very self-serving, but what is the category of that kind of chatbot called?
The category of that kind of chatbot is typically referred to as a conversational search engine or conversational AI. These chatbots use search capabilities to provide information.
No, but there's another name for it that's more computer science-y.
I didn't know there was a name. There is?
The computer science term often used for this kind of chatbot is retrieval-based model.
RAG.
This type of model retrieves...
Retrieval augmented...
That's right.
Generation.
The term you're thinking of is retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. It's a framework that combines retrieval of relevant documents from a large corpus with a generative model to create responses.
Okay, that's enough. Yeah, so I'm on the RAG, apparently.
Cool.
And so... No, it's that's what they're called, and there are several others. I don't and I like that kind of thing because it gives me the links,
right?
And I can click on them, and I can say, seriously, that's your source, or I can say, yeah, that's a good source.
I like what you said. Like, I think that the person being able to decide what's a good source, because where it's getting political is, okay, like you mentioned the Atlantic. Like, a lot of people think that's like a bogus leftist like piece of crap magazine, and they are going to say like, oh, this tech is biased if it boosts that up. So there's not consensus right now on what's a good source, which is a fundamental problem. But I think you also have a solution where people can see and they can choose.
See, this is the thing. We used to read newspapers, and the whole point of newspapers was that you had an editor, and the editor and the editorial culture around the newspaper and the history of the newspaper would sort of determine what was valid information and what wasn't, and which writers were credible and which weren't. And this whole system, why of course flawed. I don't know why anybody thinks anything is going to be perfect, including news sources or information sources. But this is the whole point. And this to me, this is the value. let me put it this way. Technologists, the Sam Altmans and the Elon Musks, they think people like you and me, journalists, editorial people, editors, our kind of people, are just a bunch of idiots who just don't know what they're doing, and it can all be improved with software and algorithms and AI.
Yes.
And they're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. And to me, something like Twitter, I've been advocating this forever. For some reason, this idea isn't obvious to everyone, but it seems to me that a site like Twitter should have different feeds. One of them should be, here's a reverse chronological order list of every post by everyone you follow. Period. We didn't take anything out. We didn't put anything in. That's one tab. Then there's another tab. Here's the editorial curation by us, Twitter. This is the real product. We have gone out looking for great content, and we put it all in one feed. And then maybe you have another one that combines the two. That would be amazing.
Right.
And that should be done with a combination of software and human curation.
Right.
That's difficult to do because you have to do all the languages, all the cultures, and you have to worry about, what does it look like in Turkey, which is like a mostly a Muslim society.
TikTok has something kind of like that. I mean, they have the people you follow tab, and then they have the algorithm curated.
Yeah, and nobody looks at the ones you follow tab. Everyone just obsesses over the curation.
Me too, yeah.
Tab. And the algorithm is so deadly. It's so dangerous because it's so good. And that's what, if you listen to Vaynerchuk's whole obsession for the last 6 months, Gary Vaynerchuk, the influencer, you know him, he said, look, we live in a new world. We live in a world where nobody cares about who follows whom anymore. People just let the algorithm hand them the content. So if you're a marketer, if you have a small business, you're trying to get your voice heard out there about your product or service, then you just need to be really good at creating TikTok videos because that's where the eyeballs come from nowadays. It's an interesting point. I don't care for it much, but
it is the world. That's the way it's going, I think, for sure.
Yeah.
Yep. I hope this isn't coming across as we're trying to protect our jobs or something. I genuinely feel like the information quality is really important to everybody, and I don't see it. I'm not worried about my job. I think that's a pitfall of discussing information quality right now, is people think oh, you loser, you just don't want to be automated, but you don't even know your job is so automatable. And it's no, I'm talking about a broader societal issue. I have tons of job security. I'm not worried about it. I just know about this issue, and I think that it's a huge problem.
Yeah.
So
and by the way, folks, journalists don't get into journalism for the money. It's a vow of poverty, and we do it because we believe in it and we love doing
it's
it.
It's about poverty.
Yes.
I'm not impoverished. We were talk about buying a house, for crying out loud.
Somebody with your education and your brains could make so much more money doing something else.
Oh, yeah. I used to make a lot more money at Amazon. I have made a lot more money than this, but it's not all about making money. It's that's not always the
exactly.
fun and
That's
the
my point. It's not
life.
about making money at all.
Right. Right.
But anyway, it's not a racket. But the biggest thing is that whenever you say, oh, the algorithms are killing us, all this kind of stuff, and the answer is always, oh, you can just easily curate your own good sources. You can independently use an RSS reader. You can do all these tools, and that is absolutely true. And that is what I do. Mm-hmm. But I still have to live in a society where everybody's a zombie staring at TikTok all day and just receiving whatever comes washing over them. That's the problem. Yep. How do you affect public opinion on this stuff?
Mm-hmm. Brain rot is happening all over the place.
So I think we've made a lot of great points on this. Why don't we talk briefly about Office?
Yep.
And then move on to drones, and then talk about buying a house, and let's try to do all this in 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I'll just get going. So on this hit list we're trying to work through. So Microsoft is cleaning out its closet this week. It announced that it's going to get rid of Skype, which is a big one, and also an app called Publisher, which I had not heard of, but apparently has been around for 35 years and has now, its capabilities have largely been replaced by, it says, by Word, PowerPoint, and Designer. So
as a representative from the past, I can say that Publisher was something for making newsletters and just publishing things in general, just doing graphic stuff, putting together any sort of, church flyers and anything you wanted to do.
Right. And that sounds useful. And I don't think necessarily that PowerPoint replicates it, and certainly not Word. It's a But in general, I mean, both those two things, it's like, yeah, of course they're not maintaining them. Like they're completely out of the zeitgeist. Nobody is using them. I've never heard of anyone getting on a Skype call. Like in my generation, certainly not lower. And I just think Microsoft is really struggling to capture younger generations, and like schools, colleges, and startups have all moved to the Google platform. And so Microsoft 365 is like, I think it's in a really bad spot.
Yeah, and but just push back on Skype. Skype is not from the late Pleistocene. Skype was the biggest deal in the world for this kind of thing.
I know,
just
but
6 years ago, it was COVID and Zoom that crushed Skype.
Because Skype should have won that race, but it wasn't good, and Microsoft didn't invest in it, and it let this dorky little startup called Zoom beat it out. So I just don't think Microsoft is it has such, its relevance is slipping through its fingers, and I'm wondering if it's just fully irrelevant to younger generations who are using Google.
For sure, it is. And, we were talking about this briefly before the show, and I mentioned that they're following the Google playbook. And what I meant by that is, of course, Google is famous for closing things. They have a thing called the Google Graveyard. Google it, or use ChatGPT to find it if you can. And it's just they every couple of months they announce that they've closed something, and whenever they announce that they closed something, you're like, wow, I never heard about that. I would have totally used that. That sounds amazing. And then a couple of months later, they do another one of those, and you're like, wow, why wasn't didn't I know about this? Google sucks at marketing the products they have. They suck at maintaining most of the products they have, and they're great at killing those products. And I fear that this is how Microsoft is kind of a little bit like Google. They kind of, here's a product that's just been languishing for years and years, and then finally they announce its closure, and people are like, what? Publisher? Anyway, it's a little Google-esque, I think.
We'll see. I think maybe if they're trying to be Google, but to me, my reaction to these was like, yeah, you should probably get rid of those. Like, you let them die, and this is just, you're not in a good spot. And I hope that by cleaning out your closet, you can make way for something new that is relevant. But I don't have a lot of faith in them. And they're hanging on Copilot, and that's AI. And we just talked about the problems with that for the last 20 minutes.
Right. Well, okay. So I wrote a piece in Computer World. I don't want to talk about it on the podcast now, but I just briefly let people know that I wrote this article about how cool business drones are. If you care about how cool drones and the amazing tech they have on them, they're flying robots with AI capabilities, and the ones that businesses use, that enterprises use to map things and to do zoning and to repair and inspect, high places like electrical cables and stuff like that, is mind-blowing. So read my article in Computer World. But let's talk about houses and the experience of buying a house, because coincidentally, you bought a house this month, basically, and I'm buying a house this month.
Mm-hmm.
We've both gone through the weird process. And again, I've bought houses before, and it was never like it is now. So tell us what you discovered in the process of your home buying experience.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about how much of it is virtual these days, like just signing contracts, DocuSigns. I mean, you have to hire an attorney to buy a house, and like
only on the East Coast.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Well, it's $2,000.
That's always been the case. The lawyer, it's the legal profession's full employment plan. We need lawyers everywhere for all these things. In California, you don't need lawyers, but
okay, interesting.
But that's always been the case.
Well, apparently it's because it used to just be even more of a Wild West, and there was just no one overlooking transactions. So there's a law that was like, well, okay, I think this is a big transaction. You need to have a lawyer involved. So basically on the East Coast, you have to pay about $2,000 on average for these people. And I have never even met this guy. I had to, get him on the phone with me. He's actually very cool. He's kind of older. But it's like, I'm just talking to him through the computer. I'm paying him $2,000. I've never seen his face besides a headshot. That's surely outdated. And he sends me documents, and I sign them. And that's just my whole transaction with buying real estate. And it just leaves me with this feeling of mistrust and just like, this is supposed to be such a big thing. And I'm just literally doing it from the same spot I'm doing this podcast. I'm buying a house.
Yeah. Well, my experience was a lot like that. And the whole thing struck me as very weird. Before I get into the signing and all the legal stuff and all that kind of stuff, I do think there are many areas of real estate and buying a house that are amazing. So go to Redfin or any sort of one of the real estate sites and look for the houses, and you see the pictures, the walkthroughs, the drone shots of the house, the drone shots of the neighbors'
That's
yards, the whole neighborhood.
Yeah.
How you can see with a drone, there's the school that your kids are going to go to, and here's the house, and you see next door they have 4 trucks on the driveway, so watch out for those, that sort of thing. And so that stuff is great. The signing the documents stuff. So I've purchased homes in both California and New York, and I've purchased land in Washington State. And so we've been through all of those. And we still have that property. It's
Where
really
is
nice.
it?
It's in southern Washington. It's an hour from north of Portland.
Okay.
Oregon.
What town? I mean, maybe you don't. Sorry, don't say it. Don't say it. It's
fine. It's fine. It's sort of, it's not in a town, so it's between. It's probably Longview. It's within
Okay, got it. Yeah, just
25
because I used to
miles
live
of
in
Longview.
Seattle, and I know there's just so much beautiful area
It's way
around
south
there.
from Seattle.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
so it's. I think the property gets 60 inches of rain a year. I mean, it's
but it's all mist.
It's just gray clouds,
Yeah.
and it's basically under forestry, so it's very low
Cool.
taxes. So I have a lumberjack shirt and everything. It's really great, but
Very rugged.
But yeah, we bought a couple of houses in New York over the we lived there in the 90s, and everybody's got a lawyer. There's a lot. Back then it was very in person. You get together in a meeting room, and everybody's talking. You meet the sellers, you meet the lawyers, you meet your lawyer, you meet their lawyer. It's all very personal. Now it's all sort of remote, but the signing thing is really bizarre because it's like we're trying to do it fast because we want to do the closing. We're only in the U.S. occasionally, so we had this window where we wanted to do the closing and the move-in, and so we were sort of rushing them and saying, let's get this going. So my wife was mainly interacting with our real estate guy, no lawyer, and she was like, hurry up and sign this, and it was some preliminary thing, and so I open it up. DocuSign automatically loads. It says just click here to sign. I'm like, have I used DocuSign before? Yeah, I guess I did for something a couple of years ago or something. My signature's there, which is not my signature. It's a car. It's like
everyone has the same font.
I don't understand how it's possible that this is a legal signature because you're just clicking on the thing and this Comic Sans looking signature is put on the document. And the other thing that was funny is kept getting these documents, and it's like, okay, sign. It says, okay, you've signed it all. And I'm like, really? And then get another document, and the last document I got was the mother of all documents. It was all the inspections, because we had every possible inspection done. It was every report from everybody who did every inspection, and it was also some other things, giving permission to blah blah blah, and I was sitting there. I got carpal tunnel syndrome, just click. Click. And again, I don't know how this is. Why is that a legal signature? What does that have to do with a signature? Why don't they stop? Why isn't the system just not pretend like something's being signed?
Right. Signatures are dead. That's the moral of the story. Clicking buttons are in. That's the new signature. It's kind of crazy. I mean, it is very convenient, and it is true that the length of these documents, even if you sign them in person, it would be infeasible to digest them fully. But there were a couple moments and a couple documents I got where I did want to ask a question about a certain clause, but I was kind of disincentivized because I wasn't in front of a person, and I would have to kick off a whole email crap. And then just it's miscommunicated over email, and it's different when someone's in person with you and you can just quickly ask, oh, hey, what is this? And so I actually do think I understood the documents less because I was signing them digitally in this frenzy, and the realtors want it done ASAP because all you have to do is click buttons. So they send me a document, and if I haven't signed it 5 hours later, I get a call. And it's just crazy. Yeah.
They do use in real estate chatbots that are supposed to have information, and I imagine that's what they'll do in the future. I imagine that within a year or two it'll be standard procedure, because the real estate industry is very big on latest technology. They're very early to do VR walkthroughs and all this kind of stuff.
Well, because they want to do like the least work possible and make the most money possible. And I mean, I'm happy there was a lawsuit to cut into their commissions because they really do not earn that money. I'm going to tell you right now, like they really don't.
As a buyer, I'm so happy that so much of that stuff is paid for by the seller. But,
Yeah.
sell it too.
Yeah.
So it's like, I think they'll have chatbots like during the contract where you'll have the outdated picture of your lawyer's head, and so mouth will move and it will answer basic questions that are common using the data that it's given before, given a whole data set of information plus the data that's in the contract, plus the conversations that lawyer has had with the other lawyer, et cetera, and so to give you meaningful questions. That's coming for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, something needs to be improved because in this weird state, it's just like you're signing contracts digitally. I mean, my lawyer with the outdated headshot is actually sending me pieces of like PDFs I have to print out, sign, scan, and send back. And so his name is George. And so George is like holding things up because like I had a work trip and I couldn't sign a document for 24 hours and the realtors, had a complete freak out like, oh, we have to close. And just the expectation is you sign a document immediately upon receiving it. And by sign, I mean press a button and the weird font appears. And you can see how they're pushing for everyone to get the next technology because they want to move fast. They want to get to a new house, and they don't really care if you understand the document. Like they really could care less.
Yeah, and the chances that there's going to be some gotcha in the real estate contract is, I mean, you have to check this to make sure all the disclosures. Oh, there's a meth lab in the basement. Didn't see that because it was just
right.
True. That's a breaking.
I got it.
But, of course it was. Okay.
Yeah, so, I think everyone got that. The meth lab, Breaking Bad.
To your point, I think my case was even more extreme because we were in California for a few days. We've been looking for a house to buy for a couple of years. Very picky about what it is. All that kind of stuff. We found a house. We looked at it when we were in California. Loved it. And then we left the country. And all of the rest of it, negotiations with the sellers, the disclosures, the arranging of the inspections, the signing of all the documents, all happened while we were in Mexico.
Right. You could have even bought the house from Mexico, given like all the digital renderings, like you said on Zillow, like you can tour the neighborhood. That's the goal for the industry. You just have transactions left and right. You probably buy a house from Mexico, you never live in it in the U.S., and then you also just sell it 2 years later.
And here's my advice based on that basic idea for anybody who's buying a house, because this is something we learned. Houses vary greatly on the degree to which the house is faithfully represented or well represented in pictures and walkthroughs that you see. And so if something is really well done with great cameras, great drone, and all that kind of stuff, they're going to get a gazillion offers. The house is going to sell right away at high price, higher than the asked for price. Look for the houses that are not so good at that kind of thing. And go and check them out. Take the time to go and look at these houses, even if it doesn't look that great on the picture. Look at it anyway. Right. In our case, that was the case. There was a bathroom and like a room. Like apparently, at some point, this house is from 1954. At some point, the above the garage was like a whole apartment, and then the bathroom for that apartment was downstairs in this part of the garage. And this was somebody in the 80s or 70s or something like that had, built it themselves, and it was kind of funky. And the bathroom was like unfinished, and it's like they're using like the materials you'd use to make a boat or something. And they put pictures of these things on the website. And so when you're flipping through these pictures, you're like, oh, this is very weird. This is very strange. But it's like this was irrelevant to the beauty of the inside of the house, and the regular bathroom and all that other stuff was great, right? And we're just going to use that garage stuff for storage. We're not going to, nobody's going to live in there. And so it doesn't matter. So, but none of this came through in the listing. And so my advice is don't just rely on the listing and photos of the listing exclusively. Understand that there's some kind of crappy houses that look amazing on the listing.
Yeah, I mean, a key theme on that one. Yeah, I would see the most beautiful house, and then you see it's like right next to a highway. It's just that's a classic. And
that's nice.
Yeah, so it's just nuts. It just there is no boundary to how much tech will let into like the most important financial transactions or like parts of our personal life. I just have this sense right now it's just so invasive, and there's like it's like nothing is stopping it from getting into every little corner of my life, and
Yeah.
it's just crazy right now.
Yep, it absolutely is.
So that's why we're doing this podcast.
That's why we're doing it. Bringing a little sanity and joy to your lives.
Making an existential crisis, that's what we're here for. To talk through it. I mean, it's all going to be okay. All right. Well, you've made it through another episode of the Unicorn Roast podcast with Mike Elgin and Emily Forlini. This podcast has no paywall, no ads, and no sponsors. As we mentioned, we're not doing this to get rich. We are doing this to give you good information. All we ask from you is a 5-star rating and a glowing review. If you could follow us, subscribe, share it, that would be amazing. You can get links to everything we talked about and show notes at our website at unicornroast.com. And we will see you next week.
Unicorn Roast.